Okay. You can take your mask off while you're speaking. You're 6 feet apart from each other.
I'm 6 feet tall, so it's.
Oh, John Dunham, he's our Mattabesett district man.
I am. Hi, everyone.
How are
Good
you?
evening.
John.
Thanks for joining
Hey,
us.
John, it's Al Garcia.
Al, how you doing?
Did you
Hey,
want?
John, it's Bill Fulton.
Oh, good.
Here, I'll put my video back on. I didn't know you guys were meeting in person tonight.
Yeah, come on by.
Come on down.
I could come on over then.
Yeah, by the time you get here, we'll be done, so, you know.
I'll stay here. That's okay.
Yeah, this is great. This is
That's
good.
fine with us.
Okay.
I
Hi, this
think
is
Art's
Art
gonna
Simonian.
call in. He was having
I
trouble
think-
getting in. I was just talking to him.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Hey, Art, how are you?
Hey, Art.
Good. How are you?
Like a
This
big
WebEx
sunburn.
thing didn't work on my computer. I don't know why. It
I
said
don't
meeting
know
has
why.
not yet started.
Well, it just now started, so
Starting now.
Get it back.
I know. All right. You think it started now?
Art,
If I go to
John,
WebEx?
you can try, please.
was there a specific item you want to put on the agenda, Art?
Where are we on the agenda?
We haven't even called it to order
We
yet.
gotta launch the meeting first.
He's thinking about
Oh, all
trying
right.
to get
Oh,
on his.
there it is. I'm going to hang up because I think I'm calling in now, so I think it's working.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay,
good.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly wanted to talk about the, your billing
Oh, there you are.
issues with.
Can
with
you hear me,
Kensington
John?
And then the letter. Yeah, I can hear you, Art.
Okay.
Looks like you're in.
All right,
Oh.
so you're on. So we'll call a meeting to order and then we can entertain or, well, we'll bring you in first or something.
Wow.
Right, so we want-
Where are you guys meeting? I don't even recognize that room anymore.
Down at Board of Ed.
Board of
Oh,
Ed, Board of Ed.
Okay. It's been a while.
Yeah.
They can take their mask off when they're talking.
All right, we'll call a meeting order at 7:03 from what it looks like right now on some of the phone, so. In attendance, we have a full commission of all 5 members, including our 2 alternates of Bill Philpon and Liam. So we have a full commission. Audience of citizens, we don't have any in attendance. Do we have any online?
Art Simonian's here, but I believe we're on the agenda. We could discuss under item 4.9. It's, I think there and 5.0 or 5.1.
Yeah, and then John Dunham here as well, Chairman of the Mattabesett District.
Okay, so I would suggest we reorder it so that we can use the gentleman,
They can hang up that part.
John, to speak for first.
All right, so yeah, we'll move the agenda along and actually bring 4.9 up to the forefront and we can handle that. And if Ray wants to discuss and bring up the subject matter, and then we can defer to John and Art.
But let's go ahead with the minutes, just that takes a half a second.
Okay, anybody have any change? Well, we'll just change right now to the minutes. There's only 2 things that I could think of that I saw under approval of minutes. At the bottom, motion was approved with Bruce LaRoche abstaining. Bruce wasn't there, and also due to the not in attendance. Just the fact I abstained, but if you want to explain it, it's not in attendance.
Were you online?
No, I wasn't anywhere.
Okay.
I wasn't in attendance. And also Norton Road Meter Station, at the end of the first line, it says, and it quite helpful. You could just insert is. It is quite helpful in measuring flows. If anybody else has any other updates, discussions, or how about we entertain a motion? Motion to approve. Okay, Jim Foley, approved. Second.
I'll second it.
Seconded Tom Lasker. All those in favor, aye.
All right.
Contrary, minds nay. Okay. Approval minutes. Now we're into new business. We can move to bring 4.9 up.
Okay, let me try to frame this. Art Simonian, the Executive Director of Mattabesett District. John Dunham is the chair, current chair.
I'm the chairman. Yep.
The chair of the board, and also representative of the Berlin individuals on the board. Trying to frame this, there's two things going on at the same time. The Mattabesset District, 4.9, received a letter from DEEP, Department of Environmental and Energy Protection, regarding potential issues of I&I. Mattabesset's been getting violation notices from DEEP as a result of that. DEEP sent them a letter indicating that they needed to do a couple of things and hold the towns that they have responsible for the I&I. Puts pressure on them to come back to the towns. As you all know, Berlin Water Control has done its fair share. We believe that Kensington and Worthington have not done their fair share, so that's another issue. But in the letter, that DEEP pointed out that the upgrades, that if this doesn't happen, that the I&Is will be reduced and their violations will not be diminished or completely eliminated, that they're looking at two items of possible concern: upgrading the Mattabesset plant facility again, or posing a moratorium on new construction. Neither one, I think, is satisfactory to us. So I sent a letter back with regard to that. That's one part of the issue. The other issue is that we have been, for the longest time, actually paying the annual bill to Mattabesset. We had an informal discussion last month about this particular issue. We got a consensus that we should consider billing individually Worthington and Kensington, so that we didn't necessarily have to collect their portions of it, but just get rebuilt only that portion that Mattabesset required of us, and that those two other districts would repay their fair share back to Mattabesset. I would do the reapportionment like I have done in the past, being that taking a look at the information and then apportioning the actual bill, the annual bill to each Kensington and Worthington. The biggest difference here is that we would not have to outlay almost over $1 million out of our own money and then wonder when or how or time frame in terms of Worthington, Kensington's payments back. That's the substantial issue that we're dealing with today. And both Art and John, Art and I and Jim Marble and Mike Kern had some preliminary discussions with this, and Art's also indicated that he wants to actually discuss it with the board directly. Art, John?
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So,
John, you want to start off?
Yeah, so let me start off a little bit about the February 17th letter, and then Art can probably handle a little bit more on the actual billing side of things. But we've been in some lengthy discussions over the last 2 years as we've been trying to get our MPDES permit renewed. And one of the stumbling blocks there is that within the permit, it doesn't allow us technically to not provide secondary treatment of all our effluent into the river. And unfortunately, our plant, which was approved by DEEP and designed for 55 million gallons a day, in a wet weather condition, we handle sometimes 105, 110 million gallons a day. So what we do is we give primary treatment and then we blend it with the secondary. Our effluent out in the river still meets the permit requirements, but DEEP is not satisfied with that because they say per the permit, we are not allowed, we need to provide full secondary biological treatment. As a result, every time we exceed that limit, we send letters over to DEEP notifying of that, and then they send it back. So as we're trying to get our permit renewed right now, they're putting pressure on us essentially to really put pressure back on the towns to reduce the I&I. And so we've been kind of going back and forth with them a little bit about that. And so one of the things I just, did want to say is at some point, we'll probably want to start meeting with the community leaders a little bit to talk to them. But they're sort of waving the threat that, well, if you don't reduce this, we're going to force Mattabesset to do things. And when we just upgraded the plant with a $105 million upgrade only 4 or 5 years ago, I mean, we did as much as we could capacity wise and given the footprint of our plant. Anything more is, we'd be spending much more probably than 100 million just to be able to get a little bit more treatment in these fewer conditions. DEEP's big issue is they think that the frequency is increased, and we've told them that hey, the frequency isn't on us. We designed to a certain limit, which is the 55 million gallons. And if the frequency goes up and down a little bit, we don't have control over that. They're looking at a long range thing. My idea of long range is, okay, we'll evaluate in 20 years. They seem to think they want to reevaluate in 5. We're working through those issues with them, and we have a tack, but ultimately, we will probably be coming back to all the communities, not just Berlin, but Middletown and New Britain, maybe a little less so Cromwell, because they don't quite have the I&I issues that everybody else does. But to work with you and to understand your overall plan for reducing those spikes that we get in wet weather times. So that's kind of the gist of that February 17th letter. We've been working closely with Deep on it. We've had, I think, our 2 meetings with them so far.
Yep.
And so, we'll likely have another, but this was the result of some meetings that we've had with them, and this was their letter that they sent. And we're working on a rebuttal to this letter right now, which should be out in another couple of weeks, I hope.
Yeah.
That's that kind of wet weather issue in a nutshell from a board perspective. And where we as the board members and all the communities are well aware of this issue. We've talked about it extensively at board meetings, and we're going to continue to work with Deep to try and get this resolved as best we can. And we're trying to get our permit right now, and it's been 2 years since they've approved it. So,
Right.
Art, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and this is our, the NIPD's permit is as John indicated, is our discharge permit. It's a 5-year permit. It expired in 2019. This permit allows us to discharge into the Connecticut River. John Dunham, our board chairman, is a Berlin resident as well. I don't know if everyone knew that. I think most of you guys do know John. So his heart's in the place of Berlin as well. So this isn't just something coming from the board, but he's trying to do what's in the best interest of the district and Berlin as well. So, but we've been going back and forth with the state on this, and they're really pushing back on us, as John said, on getting the I&I reduced. And we don't own the collection system, so we in turn have to go back to the communities to get some of that addressed. And I know I&I has been a talk for many years, even before I got here. Brian Armett was talking about I&I with me when I was the public works director in Berlin for a number of years. So it is something that it comes to head, and again, we don't have the real estate to expand our plant, even if we had the money. There's really not capacity to increase the hydraulics to pass more water. The secondary system is the biological system that John mentioned, and it goes through those big final clarifier tanks we have. So when we do primary treatment, it's just a tube. There's 2 main primary tanks, and we have 4 when we use the wet weather systems, but it's just basically primary settlement. So, under the language of the permit, we're required to fully treat all of our flows, even though, as John indicated, we're meeting our permit numbers. So you guys got copied on that letter. It's, as John said, this is our NIPD's permit letter back and forth, but I think they copied you guys because the communities have to get involved in the I&I, and you're a big part of the equation here in terms of the solution, and you guys, Middletown, New Britain. So that's kind of why you guys got involved in that. And as John said, we really will start having some meetings with the town leaders, the upper leaders, about this, because it is going to hit us in the pockets at some point, whether it's something that we have to do further, if that's even possible, or they go back to the communities and say, you need to do something further. The money's going to be real at some point. And I know nobody wants to hear rate increases and talk about more capital projects, but it's going to have to be addressed sooner than later, unfortunately. So that's, John, that's all I had to say on that item.
I think that covers it, at least from our perspective.
Right.
Yeah, on our side of the thing, you're just talking about Middletown being involved, Cromwell, and New Britain. Well, Berlin happens to have 3 entities involved in this equation. What are you doing in respect to possibly bringing the Kensington Fire District and Worthington Fire District in line to help that out? Maybe because we have no control over what they do or don't do. They're chartered by themselves.
So we have the rules and regulations we have our sewer ordinances, which talk about, discharges into our system. But from a financial standpoint, we're really associated with Berlin Water Control, which is the entity that's part of the town. As you guys get an annual assessment through the town, similar to New Britain, Middletown, and Cromwell. We're putting pressure through letters, and obviously there's consent orders from EPA and DEP to those communities, to Kensington especially. So we can't really go after them per se, other than what we do with anybody else. But we could certainly help with the providing the data to DEP and notifying them when they have violations, and we started doing that, I think, with the letters. And again, we don't know where the flow is coming from. We know what you guys say where the flow is coming from, but we as Manabasset, we don't have meter connections to Kensington Fire District or Worthington Fire District. It all comes in from Berlin system. And I know, you guys serve the communities of Worthington and Kensington. But again, it would be really difficult for us. We don't have that ability to be able to meter those separate connections from Kensington and Worthington.
All right, John, Ray, again, basically, I think you're breaking our financial back. We have, this more specifically, Webster Heights, Webster Square was over $2.5 million. Belcher Brook was over $2.5 million. So we did 2 relining projects, which of course the 2 districts contributed to, but basically were not the initiators in any fashion at all. In fact, they balked at several opportunities which they could have relined to additional lines that definitely needed. We reached out to DPC Engineering and have done I&I monitoring in several locations within the district. We have told them this over the year, no answer, no response. So I think it behooves you to come up with a strategy, because we can't do it. Physically, we can't get on their backs and do it at all. So it has to be either you, EPA, or DEP in terms of doing any additional activity. And I think you need an overall strategy with this, because we're not getting anywhere. And I'd like to see you get somewhere with this, because this is a big issue with us, and we can't. We're rebuilding, as you know, the Deming Road pump station. That's going to be a $2.5 million plan, and hopefully we'll have our fair share, and MDC will follow through. As soon as we finish with that one, the Berlin pump station on the Berlin Turnpike is the next, and I believe it's going to be around another $2.5 million for an upgrade, and possibly even more, because it's a very tight situation there, and it's an older facility. So beyond that, relining anything and doing I&I in addition to that, other than 2 or 3 manholes per year or whatever, I don't think we can afford it.
Yeah, I mean, John, I know I want to say something about that too as well. I mean, I do know that you guys have agreements with Kensington and Worthington in terms of sewer connections, and us as the district, I mean, we could put pressure more directly on our communities that we serve, easier than we could go to, just like Middletown has different districts, like a fire district or a subsection. We really don't go to the individual homeowners when we see problems per se, or problems with, just like if you weren't getting payments from your homeowners, I can't go after them per se. No more, in no way that you guys could easily go after them and lien their properties and things like that. So the ability for us to go after a district individually, I know you have the contracts, and you may have to, force their hand to a certain degree, maybe litigate if it gets to that point. But, we just.
Litigation isn't really a good option. You know that as well as I do.
No, I know. But I mean.
Just pointed out that it would take us into court about $150,000 just for one litigation system. And we would have probably 2 or 3 going on at the same time, 2 water and 2 sewer. So it makes no sense in terms of financing from that perspective. Even if we win, we still will be hurt because of the financing required for litigation. And obviously the other thing would be the time frame, probably more than a year or 2 at best.
Well, and I know you have a financial issue with the districts too as well, because that's what it's coming down to, is that everyone needs to pay their fair share. And, John, I mean, you could speak on this. I mean, for us to try to find some means to go after Kensington Fire District directly, and we certainly could provide data to DEP, but I don't have a direct relationship with Kensington Fire District on connections to Mattabesset. The only ones that has that is water control.
Yeah,
Jim Horrible here.
Hey, Jim.
And John, good to hear from you guys, but a quick thought that I have, how about if we were able to give you immediate access downstream of the Kensington Fire District within our system? We would grant you an easement, say in the next manhole down from probably where the primary flow comes from out of their system to meter that. Even if we metered it and gave you that information, likewise with Worthington and a couple of spots just downstream within our system, would that help you to help us to enforce to them what they should be doing?
So, well, let me speak a little bit about, I mean, I told Deep that we're not their enforcement arm, right? And so they're looking for us to enforce this when at the end of the day, they have, consent orders with the individual entities. We don't own the collection system. We own the trunk line. And then you tap into that system. It's really for them to do that as a courtesy. And then this is the way I presented it to Deep, is as a courtesy, I said I would work with the towns to talk to them about what their overall programs were, about what the ramifications of increased I&I are for us. But we're not in the business of policing the individual towns, no more than I would go into New Britain and say, hey, you have to do this, this, and this. They own the system. Middletown owns the system. So we own the trunk line, and we have the facility that treats the water. We designed based on certain flow requirements that the towns and the entities gave us as we upgraded our plant. But beyond that, we're not there to solve and go in and say, hey, you have to do this, this, and this. That's not our role. And so I've been trying to educate Deep on that quite a bit and push back. And so in there, I said, well, we partner with them and talk to them and certainly come on out to the various meetings and have those discussions. But
John, this is Ray again.
Yeah,
I echo what you just said. Actually, I sent that to Jennifer Perry to make sure that she does it, because I agree with you that you should not be held responsible. But I think you also hit the nail on the head because of all the entities involved here. It has to be a higher political issue. And I think it has to do with the towns standing up to Deep and saying, this is not just an individual town issue. This is a multi-level issue, particularly with Berlin, because we're unique with the three entities. We cannot override any of the other two entities. It's difficult to get normal information rather than detailed information on an I&I or anything else that might be a problem. Water.
right.
So Ray, how would Mattabesset benefit by having a direct connection with Kensington Fire District? No more so than what you have, and you're measuring flows based on their water consumption, and now you're starting to use some data from that meter reading, I think, on Baxter Avenue. But how would Mattabesset be able to do anything more than what you guys are doing?
The only advantage of that, Art, and I think that's where Jim was going with this, is that it's a third party. It's your party. The two districts don't trust us and don't recognize us. And so as a result of that, I think that's the reason. I think Jim was thinking that this may be a fairer perspective if you put it in, or if you require them to put it in and monitor it and you monitor it. Something to that effect, because we can't move the ball any, and this has happened time and time again. We can't move the ball any more forward anymore, because we feel we've done far more than our fair share. The other two districts have not. All they've done is drag their heels, drag their conditions, kind of half-heartedly done what they wanted to do, and that's it. And so the thing is, I think until EPA and or DEEP or everybody else in the party puts a lot of pressure on them to do their fair share, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think, John, the challenge for us with even trying to conceive of something like that, I mean, certainly the pressure is the most important thing in terms of the I&I, but as far as trying to separate the flows for billing purposes, we have a charter with, and we have 3 charter members, Berlin, New Britain, and Cromwell. There's reserve capacities that have been established for each of those communities and assessments that go into those formulas. MDC is the only exception. MDC is not a charter member, and Middletown now is a constituent member. So there's charter members, constituent members, and contract members, and MDC is a contract member. And to put Worthington or Kensington in as a contract member similar to MDC,
Well,
that would really change how we do our whole entire reserve capacity systems. And we're not getting all their flows. Obviously we're just getting some of them because some are still going through the Berlin Turnpike pump station and some of the other connections, Willowbrook and so forth. But
under your charter, you do have municipality, and they're listed as municipalities and or districts. So they are an entity, maybe not a constituent entity, as you pointed out, because Berlin, Cromwell, Britain, and in this case, I guess, Middletown as well, are constituent municipalities. But they are still regarded as municipalities, and I think they still fall under your purview. I think the argument you have, and I think the way I see it anyway, is that you don't have the violation capability, the authority to give the violations and put pressure on them. I think the town has it. I think DEP has it. I think EPA has it. And so I think you got to throw it back into that perspective. How we get to that point, I think, is a difficult one. That's the one that I need to shoot for. And if it requires all the town managers and the town mayors to get together to put DEP on the spot, well, then so be it. I think it's a better thing rather than us fighting in between ourselves, trying to jockey here and not get anywhere.
Well, I'll just add that it's a challenging thing. I know what you guys are up against, mostly because I've been in your shoes, Ray, before, and trying to manage the other districts. We know ideally you'd have one district or one entire water control system or district for the entire town of Berlin, but that doesn't seem to be moving its way in that direction at this point. And the I&I is really the biggest challenge, and how we go about solving it. I think John brought up a good point, and got the right method of doing this is we got to get the town leaders on board so they recognize that this is real serious and it's going to hit everybody in the pockets more so than the I&I work if something isn't solved. And there's got to be a more concrete plan in place. And I know you guys have spent a lot of money on I&I work and lining and pump stations, and Kensington thinks they've spent their money too, and that's where I guess some of the arguments coming in. And to John's point, we don't have policing authority over what happens. We're not like an MDC or Greater New Haven where we own the collection systems and can go after whether it be businesses or districts. It's not our system. So we deal with what we receive and where it comes from, which, right now it's coming from Berlin Water Control in terms of the way we're structured. But, we'll put again, Ray, we'll put pressure on where we can.
Berlin, not necessarily water control. So I think we have to be distinctive here.
Yeah, but I mean, it's been set up this way, Ray, for 40 years, 50 years. And there's always been districts in Berlin, since way back when. So it's not something like we just changed 5 years ago and said, by the way, we're just going to build Berlin Water Control and forget about Kensington Worthington and let Berlin Water Control handle that. It's been this way for years, and it hasn't been a problem in the past. It's been a problem now because the costs are increasing. That's the issue.
Well, it's the other thing is true that both of the districts were incorporated in 1921. We're getting to the point where they're over 100 years old, which they do have distributions, water and sewer distributions that are nearing 100 years old and have not done any serious replacements or relining or projects. How long do you think that's going to go before something has a major failure? In 2013, when you were here, Art, Lower Lane, Worthington did a relining project on Lower Lane, which apparently was cambered and had indicated that they had a huge longitudinal crack in their clay pipe. That most predominantly, both districts have huge clay line pipes, and they're only 2 feet, 4 feet of pieces that were put in the early 20s and 30s. I mean, their whole systems are at a point where they need to have some upgrades. They don't put
Well,
any money into the upgrades.
Yeah, I believe that's Ray. That's already in progress. I mean, I've seen reports from Leonard. I've seen letters from EPA and DEP. So there's already that mechanism in place to start identifying where those problems are. I don't think anyone's arguing about that. The question is, you know, what's it going to come down to in terms of rehab? How much money is needed, and where's the money going to come from?
All right, just one thing again, Jim Horrible here. Just to recognize the fact that, and I'm sure you do, that the town of Berlin Water Control has spent significant, and I emphasize significant dollars to eliminate I&I over the past 10 years, where the other districts, Kensington and Worthington, have essentially done nothing from a dollar standpoint. We've probably spent over $5 million, and they have yet to show us what they've spent to reduce I&I.
Jim, were you able to measure any reduction in I&I from water control system yet?
Unfortunately, because of the fact that Worthington and Kensington flow into our systems, we've measured their systems, and we know the I&I that's coming through there, and it's beyond significant.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think that data's got to get to the point of DEP and EPA to say, here's some real-time data from these other districts, and here's what we're seeing for flows coming out of Berlin's system, and here's where it's originating from. If there's a consent order for Kensington Fire District, and that there's data that shows they have I&I in terms of factors of 3 and 4 multipliers of their base flows, and the millions of gallons that are flowing through are real numbers, then that should be support in itself that something's got to be done.
Well, Dave Prickett, who did most of our studies, has indicated that there's a couple places that are very high I&I, just without any doubt. We were looking at a town-wide proposal, which we don't have any buy-in from Worthington or Kensington, which would require a significant monitoring perspective to get a better picture of what's going on. As Jim just pointed out, one of the problems is that we don't have a good evaluation of the flows, other than, believe it or not, and it's because of you, and technically the Kensington Fire District one basically lends itself to easily being separated out, because Baxter Avenue represents between 90-95% of their flow, and then Willowbrook is the other portion of their flow. So if you subtract that out of the equation, the remaining portion is Worthington and ours. And oddly enough, on the Berlin Turnpike, you would think that we were the largest contributor, but we're not. We're probably the smallest contributor, because 1,200 customers come in from Worthington, and we probably have a little less than 1,000. And then Kensington has over 3,000 customers going in through that system. So you can see prospectively, their flows are a lot larger than ours in most cases.
So maybe part of the solution that DEP and EPA consider is to require more meter connections from the different districts into water control, so that those meter connections can be monitored and they could be properly assessed and determine that where the source of the I&I is coming from, so they could immediately go after them if that's where it's coming from. Because I think that's where some of the argument is on Kensington's side, and you've heard it from them, and they've said, you know, they're saying that they've done their fair share and that they don't have the I&I problem. It's Berlin Water Control that has the I&I problem. So it's, you know, I guess the proof's got to be, someone's got to, you know, make a determination of who's telling the truth, and you know, where this data is, what this data is really showing. So, yeah,
we gotta work on justifying it before anything. Well, justifying it and get actual flows and everything else, and then justify the DEP and EPA would be a step in the right direction, so that we can progress in that direction, correct?
Yeah, I think that's the right way to go. And, you know, and I sympathize with the billing system because I was there when we set up those agreements. There was never any agreements in place for 30 years. And then we finally put one in place, I think in 2010 or 12 before I left. But, you know, at that point, there was no meter connections that we knew of any flows. We didn't know about the Baxter Street connection for Kensington, that 95% of their flow goes through that connection. So we said we'd bill them based on water consumption and proportional share of I&I. And, you know, now that this new data is there, you know, I know the agreement may, you know, Ray, I think indicated that it's felt that the agreement is written in a way that the I&I is should be proportionally shared based on who's responsible for it. So if you have data that shows that Kensington has more I&I than just their, you know, water consumption fair share, that the percentage is much higher for Kensington, I think you're right to go after that for them to pay that.
Well, in the last year, from June 1st to September 31st was the driest in 150 years of record. In the CCR, the Consumer Confidence Report that Kensington had, they indicated their average daily demand for water consumption was 800 to 4,000 something in that gallons per day. Now, the minimum flow we were getting out of the Baxter Avenue was 1.84. And then
1.84 million gallons per day.
Per day, and we were getting, and at rainfall, which every time you've got a rainfall that was excessive in your, as John was saying, over 55 million, we would get a spike over 6 million in that Baxter Avenue, 6 million. So that doesn't come from their water consumption by any means, and it tracks extremely well with rainfall. Now, the other thing I wanted to add to you is that your suggestion about additional studies is fine, but there've been studies back to 1996 and earlier that weren't acted upon. CDM had studies basically had indicated that where there was significant leakages. We've never had any indications that they were doing any work in that Worthington and Kensington.
So the Baxter connection basically is 95% of Kensington's district, but where it's coming from Kensington, nobody really knows per se. Certainly water control doesn't know where it's coming from. They just know it's part of their system. There's probably connections, there's probably sumps, there's storm drains that are maybe tied in. But that should be part of the consent order and the plan to rectify that. That's why I assume they signed their consent order and agreeing to it.
But going back even when your time was here, just as a for instance, in one of the explanations what they had, even when you were here and we did it, CDM did it, or yeah, it was them. But there was the total evidence of sump pumps completely over an abundance amount of sump pumps in the Kensington Fire District. It was never addressed whatsoever.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that. The infiltration was one portion, but the inflow, which is the sumps and the connections, that was like the unknown. And the way they were going to solve that was basically trying to go door to door and get people to disconnect voluntarily or pay them, like City of New Britain, I think, was actually paying property owners, you know, a few $100s to disconnect and try to do it that way. But it's hard to believe there must be roof leaders, storm drains in people's backyards, and maybe even like, you know, storm drains from maybe some of the streets, who knows, that are connected in. But, you know, that kind of flow like that Ray's indicating shows that there's quite a bit of storm drainage connected into the sanitary.
Well, Jonathan, we appreciate the discussion and the opportunity. Obviously, I think not sure how we want to get to the strategy, but I like John's suggestion in terms of bringing in the town officials in terms of starting this with DEP, some kind of initial discussion with DEP. You had indicated you're preparing a letter, I presume, response back to that February 17th.
Correct.
Would that be an opportunity to sit down and talk to the town managers and mayors to?
I think that's probably will be the time we do that. We're going to get our letter prepared. I'm still kind of talking to other board members because, you know, I've got to go to the other communities as well. We're going around presenting our budget. And so, you know, those are sometimes good opportunities to at least say, hey, we'd like to set up a meeting and that type of thing. So we'll be working on that over the next, 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll start having that discussion. But again, it's just a discussion. I didn't say, I told Deep, listen, we're not the police. We will partner, and we're more than willing to talk about it and help folks understand that Deep at some point down the road, now maybe it's not right away, but 5 to 10 years may want to, cause the district to do more. And if they do that, then that just gets passed on. And in my mind, that's not an efficient use of monies. But, who knows? We'll see how things go.
All right, Ray, that sounds good. So we'll do what we can on our end here, and like John said, we'll try to get our meeting set up, and then we'll reach back out to you. And if you need anything else on what you're doing with Kensington with meter connections, just give me a call. I could give you some more ideas that I had too.
The Mattabesett District's presentation of their budget to the town of Berlin Town Council is April 6th.
April 6th,
Sounds right.
correct. Yeah, they had it on the agenda last time, but Kate was so excited that I sent the agenda item over early that she put it on one meeting too soon. So, so we're on for April 6th. Yes.
Thanks for joining.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
All right.
Everyone,
Have a good night, everyone. Take care, Jim.
yeah, Al.
All right, have a good evening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you too. Bye-bye.
Okay, that takes item 4.9 off the list. It's technically 5.1. Okay, new business. We did the
New business, we had that blueprint or whatever, the print that came out and it was passing around.
Who had it? William?
Yeah.
Let me explain it very quickly. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the name was Nate. I think it's on the poster.
This is very similar to, we haven't done this very frequently, but we've done this a couple different times. This lady, basically purchased a property. This is what Liskey, I believe it is. Basically purchased a property which is bounded by Weathersfield Road on one side, Beckley Road on the other. On one side it's about 450 feet, and the other side is 400 feet. It seems a little bit unfair to basically build her as in terms of the actual assessment by either the 400 or 450. So I went back and looked at it, and it's zoned in R43, which basically in R43 usually encompasses 150 feet. So I would recommend that we use the 150 feet as the assessment characteristic for assessing her for the sewer connection.
That's right on that point.
Yeah, and she has an opportunity because the sewer line is on Beckley Road, right across from the property. It looks like it would be a perfect location and perfect site to provide sewer service to her home. So what I'm asking for is a vote here and approval to give her an exception, you want to call it, so that we use the 150 feet rather than the actual bound of the property on both sides of the street.
So in advance of discussion, if we have a motion for that purpose, we entertain. Anybody want to move it?
I'll second it.
You need the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Al, motion, a second, Barry. Okay, discussions, anybody, everybody seen it? Any inputs? Okay, all those in favor, aye? Contrary minds, nay. Okay,
Item 4.2, last town council, the one that Art didn't make it, but we had an agenda item. Basically, what we did is actually two agenda items. One was a budget transfer at 4.3 to transfer money out of the East Berlin relining. Every year I pocket money aside for the relining project because I believe that's going to be about $3 million. But this year we've had a different priorities. We want to replace the 20-inch concrete pipe that runs along from Deming Road to Woodlawn. I think I mentioned this briefly before. It's a pipe that nobody wants to do work on. It's a pipe that has potential of catastrophic failure. We have several projects that are going along that way. And we would not want to have to connect to the 20-inch line because it would be an 8-inch connection. So we feel that
even if we could find a contractor, it actually has utility.
Yeah, I went out and sent a survey out to 4 contractors, and none of them replied back.
And as I mentioned earlier, I got a chance to talk to Lou Stam about it,
Yeah,
and something else that he didn't either,
Blue Stem is a contractor.
like Stam Construction.
The other issue is I contacted the chief engineer over at the MDC. She basically indicated that they have concrete pipe, very little of it, but when they have concrete pipe and have to do work on it, they have to drain. We're not in the position of draining it. We just have no other option to that. So that's become my highest priority. So we're awarding and what we're asking for is a bid waiver for Leonard Engineering to do the design.
What's the length of that pipe?
Excuse me?
What's the length?
About
of
3,000 feet. It'll be a 16-inch ductile iron, so that's the best pipe we can get out there. So we're gonna replace that, and we're gonna leave the 20-inch in here and probably eventually just let it abandon. So anyway, we're looking at something of a design perspective by this middle of the summer, and hopefully construction by either the late summer or beginning of fall. We are looking at a DWS rough loan. This is compatible or parallel to the EAT program, which is the Clean Water Fund. So this is a low interest loan also. So we would take it out. It's about $1.6 million. And then my second priority, but it won't happen this year, is the interconnection to Middletown, Meriden system, which should be down the Berlin Turnpike. And of course, the rationale for that is because we would get additional supply. The hydraulics are perfect. We would need any pump station, use the meter stations, and it would be sufficient enough to allow us to take the tank, limitation tank out of service, basically repair the tank, which needs to be done within the next year or two. So that's my second priority. Hopefully we'll be doing that later next year. Third priority, which was originally my first, was the East Berlin Fire District relining. I still need to do that somewhere along the line, but that's kind of down. That's moved down because that price tag's pretty much. So that concludes item 4.2, 4.3. Middletown payment. When we originally looked at an interconnection with Middletown, and actually we do have an interconnection, but we don't have a meter station. So that's another option. I'm looking down the road. Meter station would cost us about $600,000. There'd be some additional piping work, so that might be another opportunity down the road. But right now, it wouldn't help us on anything on the western portion of our distribution system. So keeping this in the mix in terms of doing it down the road, but not necessarily in the near future. We do have one sewer customer there, and we get about $4,000 compensation for that every year from that customer. 4.5, I made my pitch to the Public Works and to the Water Bureau for the MDC to see if I could get some additional funds for them. Basically shut me down. One of the reasons that they shut me down was probably, I don't believe is an accurate reason, but anyway, they used it as an excuse, is the idea of precedent. They were afraid of paying us a small amount would eventually get them in trouble with paying somebody else a larger amount because it sets precedent. I don't necessarily agree with that because the precedent is the setting. Nobody that I know of, or any company and or municipality would go 33 years or 34 years without payment for something. This is a ridiculous situation for us. So we're only getting paid out of the 34 years, around 10 years out of that. So, which you mentioned before is about $200,000. But with all the other repayments, it comes out to about $1 million. So it's not bad, but I was hoping a little bit better. So
Any legal recourse?
legal recourse, probably not. It cost us about $150,000. They would dig their heels in. I don't think that they would work that. I am going to try to make one more pitch to the tire board. They don't like that, but basically I don't see anything other than sending them an email and asking for an appeal. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it's not a big cost. So,
right. Is there a statute of limitation on that?
Well, the statute of limitation, obviously, they think that they've already given us a deal because it went back 10 years. The statute of limitations is 6. But my argument is that they found out in 2016, didn't do anything about it. So that's why they gave us the extra 6 going back to 2010. So they paid us back from 2010 to 2019. 2020, I have to get the invoice, but they're going to be paying us for that as well. The big thing is that they are, just a couple times before, they're going to be paying 60% of the pumping station at Denny Road, which is going to be $2.5 million. So we already have money budgeted to ready to pay for it. So we're fine with that without any rate increases or whatsoever. So that puts us in a pretty good light when that station gets rebuilt. The next station on the Berlin Turnpike is another discussion we have to talk about. Our friend Jim Mahoney, who technically still works with the town, but lives in Maine, apparently, I'm not sure of all the detail, was able to put in a state bond proposal for the Deming Road pump station because because it's obviously with MDC, so that's one thing. It's a regionalization type of approach because in MDC we're technically serving a good portion of Newington, a good portion of Rocky Hill, so it looks good. The governor really looks for regionalization items and likes that. Basically, they're asking for $1 million. This would be $1 million grant. If that occurs, that even puts us in a better spot because that would reduce the overall cost from 2.5 to 1.5. And again, then 900,000 of that would be basically NDC's 600,000, which would give us almost another 700,000 or 800,000 extra. So I'm hoping that we can get that. We won't know until down the road. Our 3 legislators, Kathy Abercrombie, Donna Beach, and Rick Lopes are familiar with it, so hopefully they'll be supportive of it. 4.7 is a proposed subdivision. I've mentioned this once before. This is a little bit unique. As you know, we've asked the Berlin Water Control and putting in the charter gives us the right that anything beyond the districts of Worthington and Kensington are basically our responsibility, our options. And the town charter says that, and the water utility coordinating committee process, the state health department basically has given us that right also. As you know, we were asked to expand the sewer service area. We don't want to expand the sewer service area until we have an agreement with Kensington. We had a preliminary discussion with Joe Cagliarulli. I sent him a letter asking to sit down and go over some kind of an agreement. In that agreement, we could serve that district. It's about 76 customers, I believe it is. But we could purchase water through Kensington Fire District, and this would become part of our distribution system. It's not terribly unusual in the state. A lot of utilities do this, and basically, we basically do it right now without an agreement. So it can be done, but there's a little bit of hesitancy on the Kensington Fire.
We've done it in the past, and in our minutes, there was a vote that was taken by this commission to actually evidence our displeasure that we were not going to serve it by virtue of them taking it over.
Correct.
So that is already on the record.
Okay, that's correct. And we've sent that over to Attorney Pintor representing Kensington Fire District. Item 4.8. This happened. I think it was covered in last month's meeting, but it was ongoing at the time. Stankamp had a breach in their pipeline, in the sewer pipeline. We call it the Stankamp pump station, although it's our pump station. It's just physically located outside of Stankamp. They were adamant they didn't think it was their product, but it turns out to be their product. We had it tested, we had it analyzed. It's a polymer base. Basically, they produce polymers for how do they put it? They take monomers and create polymers, basically for latex and latex paints. So that odor in that pumping station was so bad that more step repairs. So they corrected the breach, and they actually paid us for our services, including the vacuum service that was done by Drain Doctor. So it's back up to snuff, and so we did the replacing that. sort of the internal structure of that pumping station. So they did really, really well. They, basically got that. Scope of work. Yeah, I guess over there was the operations manager that helped out. 4.9 we already did, 5.1, with regards to, we're talking about the Madawaska billing, but with regards to our billing for previous outstanding payments, anything in fire district, whether that we don't have any additional action to stipulate at this point. What I would like to do at this time for a short term is ask for a motion to go into executive session to discuss possible litigation.
Second,
So second it.
either or. There you are. All those in favor to go into executive session? Aye. Contrary minds?
Executive session.
Executive session. Activated.